and welcome to Property Mastermind podcast episode 110 with Hilary Saxton and Bob Anderson, the legend. Today we're talking important things to know about your financier and valuer. We're going to pull this apart, unpack it, and leave you with a lot of useful information that you'll be able to use moving forward on your property development journey. So anyway, let's jump on into episode 110. Episode 110, Hilary Saxton and Bob Anderson. Hey Bob, welcome.
Thanks. Great to be back.
Great to be back at the podcast area in the office, in the podcast room.
Podcast room.
Hey Bob, what are you going to share with us? What's your fun fact for the week?
Well, how about, this is a shared one.
Oh, a shared fun fact, yeah.
How about when your kids come back to stay at home for a short period and then they stay?
So the fun fact is what? That kids don't tell the truth?
Kids never tell the truth. Oh, just coming home for a few weeks, or I just need to fill in between moves or between something, yeah.
We just had a bit of an experience, didn't we?
Well, it wasn't a bad one. But
it's great. I loved it. But we had some children move home for the old 2 weeks anyway. 6 months later, we put them on a plane to Europe yesterday. So we're kind of relaxing back to Darby and Joan. It became this crazy cooker woman cooking for rugby players.
Yeah, two rugby players in the house.
I just felt
Male
like
and female rugby players. They can eat.
Oh, and the washing.
And the washing.
What about that? It was horrific. It was amazing. Great fun. Lots of laughs, but oh my goodness.
Anyway, that's a fun fact. Don't believe them if they say 2 weeks or whatever.
That's your fun fact. No,
yeah.
Good fun fact today. So Bob, today we decided that we are talking important things to know about your financier and valuer. And we've just got some great tips and stories here that we know that people will find, quite useful. So, but before we start and I ask you to unpack each role, I want to ask you, well, do you want to go with each role? Because the other question will be, why do we need them? So where do you want to start? Do you want to identify the role specifically?
Yeah.
And then why do we need them? So what is the role of the financier and what is the role of the valuer? And I know that many people know the answer to this, but we also know that we often plug knowledge gaps, easy for me to say. So we might plug a few holes for you if you just have the odd little bit missing that you're not aware of.
Well, the use of a financier is pretty obvious. Most of us don't have enough money to, first of all, do a whole project without borrowing. But the other side of it is, why would you anyway? Because the value or our profit comes in property development, not just from doing a development, but being able to leverage money, to leverage finance. So we leverage our money a lot better when we borrow. Let's say the bank gives us 4 or 5 times as much as we put in, which is sort of normal. Well, it's that power of leverage that really boosts our profit up. Our return on our capital invested in a property development. And it looks the same in property investment, same thing. You know, you put a 20% deposit down, the bank lends you 80%, so you're using their leverage. You know, the property that goes up in value is yours, not the bank's.
So you're implying there that even though you have enough money, doesn't mean you should necessarily use all of your own money. You should apply the power of leverage to what's the word to go faster? Expedite your journey.
Yeah. Let's just say you had a project where the total costs were $4 million and you had $4 million. And so that's fine.
In the bank.
Just
sitting
cash,
there.
sitting there.
Doing
so
nothing.
you could do that project without going to a financier.
Yeah.
And that's great. And you'd save interest, which is good. But what if you were then to do 2 projects of the same size, where you put $2 million each into each project and borrow 2 from a financier? You would make more money out of those 2 projects doing that, because you're now you're leveraging the bank's finance. And the interest you pay from the bank is a lot less than half the profit. And you could extend that. Well, why don't we do 4 projects with our $4 million, putting $1 million into each? Yeah. That would be, a 75% lend. Why don't we do that? And we would make more money again. Of course, the more you borrow, you might say the higher the risk, potentially, but there's a point in there that's comfortable. If you're doing everything else right, doing your due diligence right, choosing the right projects, the right team, everything, then that's where you really ramp up your profits, by leveraging the bank's money. The great thing is, well, I say bank, I don't necessarily mean a bank, it's a financier of sorts, whoever they might be, bank, non-bank, private equity, doesn't matter. But it's by leveraging their money. Because, you see, we only pay them interest, we don't pay them profit share.
So so the role of the financier is to loan the money?
Loan the money.
So what is the role of the valuer?
Well, it's to mitigate some of the risks in the financier lending the money. So financiers are very good at doing what they do, and that's lending money. But in order to lend money, they have to be diligent in how they lend. They don't want to lend and take risks or not much risk at all. And so in a property development, the bank relies on two experts to help them. And the first expert is the valuer. So in terms of, the site, the value of the site, is the project viable, those sorts of things come from the valuer. We pay for the valuer as a developer, but the valuer technically is doing the valuation on behalf of the financier. So it gives some form of comfort for the financier that the project's going to be a deal that stacks up, basically. The other expert later on during the construction phase or pre-construction is the quantity surveyor, and that's the other expert that the bank's financiers wind out, and that's all to do with the construction side of things. So frontline valuer right up front.
I just had a thought then. It was around, you were talking about the valuer, the relationship with the financier. Are they necessarily friends, or does the valuer technically work for the financier? How does that work, Bob?
Oh, look, in property development, so they're obviously independent. They're an independent valuation firm. Let's just break, it might be a good time now that you've asked that, to break finance down on just a typical small project. Right? Let's choose something small. Could be a duplex or a
let's go with
pack.
We're in South Sydney and we're doing a duplex. There we go.
There you go. Okay. So first of all, we need a financier when we buy the site. Now we call it a site as developers, but most of the time what we're buying would be an old property. It might be an old property in a good area. We're going to buy it. We're going to get our approvals. Then we're going to demolish it, build a new duplex and sell it and make money. That's what we're going to do here in the southern parts of Sydney, apparently.
I just made that up.
Thanks. Could be anywhere, though, where a duplex stacks up, of course. So as far as the financier is concerned, when we buy that, we're just buying an investment property. And look, ideally, and you would have heard me say this if you've done our course or even perhaps on some of the podcasts, it's an investment loan up front. So retail banks who lend on investments, they're the sort of financiers or banks typically that we use when we buy a home for ourselves or an investment property. They make their money by lending at a low interest rate for a long term, 20, 30 years.
They love the old 20, 30-year loan.
They do. And so they can make really good money out of that by lending at a lower interest rate. However, what they don't make money at is lending at a low interest rate for a short period of time. So if you've got a project, small one, might be 18 months, could be 24 months. At a really low interest rate, banks don't make much out of that. Retail banks don't. So they generally don't like to finance development projects, typically. And as a result, if you were to buy that property, that site, that old house on good land, and tell them that your intention is to get an approval and develop it and sell it, they probably don't want to talk to you because they don't make money. What they'll typically do is say, look, you need to go and talk to our commercial division. If it was a bank, they'd say, look, we don't finance property developments, but we have a commercial division. So in the world of commercial finance is what we typically use in property developments during the construction phase at least. They lend at a higher interest rate for a shorter period of time. They're okay with that. That's how they make their money.
What's the general difference, Bob, between those two rates?
3%.
3%.
Thereabouts. And in terms of the interest rate, there's other expenses with commercial loans. You'll have to get a commercial valuer, so that'll cost you more for the valuation. There's quantity surveyors, there's other people that are brought into it. But the thing is here, typically, with a retail loan, you try and avoid the subject of what you're going to do if you're going to develop it.
What if they ask you and you tell a porky?
Well, people can change their mind,
Right.
which sometimes happens.
Yes, got you.
But we've seen, in fact, you're well aware of a few cases where, in spite of anything we've said in our courses, people have gone out, they've gotten a broker to get them their finance for the acquisition of the site.
Okay, so we didn't bring up, let's, before we go into the above, broker versus financier.
Oh, well,
okay, so now I was going to ask that before, and okay, so now we need to, we're throwing that one in the mix. So now explain the role of a broker.
Okay, so a broker's job is to find you the best finance to suit you personally.
So the broker
for
finds
what
the
you wanna
financier.
do. Yeah, and if it's, I mean, most people have probably used brokers for even
Buying homes. Yeah.
buying a home. I mean, you can go directly to the bank or you can go through a broker. In the world of retail finance, where we have low interest rate loans for a long period, a broker normally doesn't charge you a fee to
Actually
find
paid
you
by
a
the
loan.
bank.
It's built into the loan somewhere by the bank. So I keep saying banks because typically they do retail loans, but they're not the only people that do them. But within their whole pricing system, they would have allowed for a certain percentage of their home loans to come through a broker, and therefore those fees are built in, and the broker gets paid technically by the bank, but at the end of the day, the consumer always pays. But it's built in. It's built in there. In the world of commercial finance, which we typically use on property development, particularly in the construction phase, we have commercial brokers who have different contacts in the commercial finance world, different from retail brokers. And normally you pay them the fee. They're not normally built into the loan. So the choice is, if you're using a retail loan, you might want to use a broker because they might get you the loan that you can't get yourself. They know the different lenders, they know who's lending, they know who's maybe aggressively, loading their book up and has good rates and so forth. They'll know that. In the commercial world, my recommendation is, until you get to know a number of financiers yourself, use a broker. The name of the game is get me the money. If you haven't got the money, you can't do the project.
We've got great relationships with our brokers, don't we? We really do.
Yeah.
They just, you get to know them, and they're good people.
Yeah. So that's my motto. Even with commercial finance, and even if you have to pay the broker, it's just the cost of doing business. But they can get you the best finance.
Told.
And they know the contacts, because normally the average person, particularly when they're starting out, you don't know the contacts in the commercial world. There's plenty of retail brokers out there. You can sort of, rock up to a bank and knock on the door for a retail loan.
And ask your neighbour and your mate, but yeah.
Yeah, but commercial is quite different, so brokers are good.
It leads me to, Bob, something that it took me a long time to understand in business as well, personally. But you have to pay to play. And when you try and do things on the cheap, on the side, get stuff for free, you're just slowed right down.
Yeah.
I even this morning, I'm at the gym at 6 a.m, as I do. I've been in the office since 5, cleaned out Tuesday's my day. It's my best day. But I listened to a podcast and I was already thinking yesterday, I got another business coach. Even though I am a coach, I get coaches. And I thought, it's time. So I usually have 2 other coaches on the side right now as well, doing some other things that I'm working on personally. And then I thought, do you know what? I actually need and even though I am a marketer, I have a diploma in marketing, I've marketed myself my entire life, I teach people how to do it. I thought, you know what I need? I need to step into a marketing coach that I've been talking with, and she's helping me do some stuff, in my personal branding business. And I thought, I need her as my coach. But you have to pay to play. And I haven't rung her yet, but as soon as we're done podcasting, she is my next port of call. So people need to realise that the more you start doing that, and that's how I noticed my progress, that's how we noticed progress with everything we do. Once you start getting the right people to help you and stop thinking, I'll learn it myself, I'll Google it myself. It's just, it's a closed mindset mentality.
Yeah, and close to that is that mentality of, try and save every cent I can by doing this or doing that myself. And what happens, you save 50 cents and you lose $1.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yeah. And that's something I do notice you do, Bob. You will always say, "Oh, well, no, just do it. Just do it." You'll always jump into, "No, it's got to be done. Do it." And even to the point, and we're going completely off track, but this probably goes to show the type of person you are. We recently launched the Property Accelerator, our new membership program, and I will tell you a bit about that at the end. And the guy that recorded it, great guy, is it's 4 full-on courses: property development, renovations, small subdivisions, coaching and mindset. They're not his thing. But he is doing the editing and putting it together. And he said to me, "Oh, Hilary, I think I may not have quoted enough." And we're straight away, "Well, then that's fine. You just tell us what the difference is." Because that's the cost of business. We want to have a more relationship, continue the relationship with him.
Yep.
He puts us at the top of his tree. He does so much. When we need him, he's there. We've got an online workshop coming up. I can call him on a Sunday morning. He'll just jump in and help me. But when you build a relationship, a business relationship that you pay for, that you... where am I going? You know what I'm saying? It's it's the cost of business is a great way. And that's how you have good relationships in business.
Long-lasting relationships, yeah. And what we asked him to quote on was very difficult to give us a lump sum quote.
Yes.
We knew that.
Yeah.
He had a shot at it. But we realised, and he realised there's a bit more in it.
Yeah.
And so that's what we'll do. It's a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
And we'll pay him. It's fair. If he puts more time in, we'll pay him for that more time.
And I was even thinking, we went for lunch a couple of weeks ago with your solicitor. He was up here because he does a lot of work for you in property development. You've known him for over 40 years. But you don't do anything. He does nothing for you on the side for cheap. You still pay for him. Well, he does probably bump your requirements to the top of his list because you've always done business with him. Anyway, we're off track. That we were just talking about. You were talking about paying for you
get what you pay for.
Yeah.
Don't try and save 50 cents and lose $1 by being stingy.
So we've gone through what is the role for each. Have we really covered off why we need them, Bob? Why do we need them? Why do we need?
Well, we know why we need a financier, and the valuer. Well, the financier insists on it.
Yeah.
And so that we sort of moved on and talked about retail finance and commercial. So you've got retail valuers and commercial valuers as well. But look, I've seen deals fall over where the developer has been buying a site, tried to get retail finance, gone to a broker who didn't really understand the story that he needed to tell to the financier. And I've seen this happen a few times, as recently as probably 3 weeks ago. And inadvertently, the broker, who's not experienced in property development at all, spilt the beans and they just canned it.
So that is a really good tip. There's about 3 tips come out already. Got to pay to play. Get the right person working for you and get the right broker who has potentially had some experience in property development to know what they need to be telling the financier so you get the finance.
Yeah. And brokers, valuers.
Yeah.
And valuers, they're not all the same. They're not all equal.
Holy moly, Bob. We know that one.
Yeah. Here's a strange story. It still amazes me. We had somebody in our mentoring program, and this is some years ago. They were buying a site for some townhouses. It was $750,000. So what it was an old house on, can't remember, 850 square metres or whatever, suitable for townhouses. And they were buying it. So they went to one particular bank, and the bank chose the valuer, as they do there, and the valuation came up low. It came up at $500,000. Now, I wasn't shocked because, and this was it was a financier who knew it was going to be a development eventually, but in terms of the security, they can only value it as a house because it didn't have an approval. So it's just a house. If it doesn't have an approval, it's not a development site, technically, as far as the finance is concerned, and it was just a house. It was a pretty crappy house.
It might have potential, but it's not right now.
Yeah. And so, as a house, if you went to sell it as a house, it probably was worth about $500,000. But the sale price was $750,000, and if you put $750,000 in your feasibility, it actually stacked up as a deal. Now, this particular developer needed it to value up at $750,000, Otherwise, she would have had to put in quite a bit more cash because the bank financier would have lent at the time 80% of 500, not 80% of 750. So she would have had to put in 20% of 500, which was 100, plus the other 250 shortfall on the valuation, 350. She didn't have it. She then went off to another financier.
Was this the one not the same firm? No.
Different financier altogether,
Yeah.
totally different financier. They nominated the valuer. You wouldn't believe it. The same valuation firm who just gave the dud valuation through the other financier. And he said, oh no, of all the valuers for them to choose,
Yeah.
they've chosen the same valuation firm I've just got a bad valuation with. And I said, look, sit it out. Sit it out, because we don't know if it's the exact same person in there, but it's unlikely to work. But let's say you're in for a penny in for a pound, as they say, you know. You wouldn't believe it. The valuer came back with a valuation of $750,000.
Whoa.
So this is two individual valuers inside the same valuation firm, valuing the same property 3 weeks apart, and there's a 50% difference in their valuation.
Heck. Hey, can I just ask you a question there, Bob? When you said she came to you and said that, oh, you're not going to believe it, same valuation firm, are you able to say, no, I want a different valuation firm?
Oh, look, usually you
Yeah,
have to choose somebody off their panel.
Yeah.
In the commercial, it's easier with commercial. That was a retail finance situation
Right.
at that time, and was back in the days when retail financiers tended to lend a bit more on development. In the last sort of 5 years or so, they pulled back a lot on doing that. And so that was a retail bank. And typically with retail banks, they like to nominate the valuer. In commercial finance, you normally have a choice. Most financiers have, it could be 3 or even sometimes 4 valuers on their panel that they will accept valuations for. And you can get a quote from each of the valuers, find out what their time frames are like, and you can choose one. And you might already have a relationship with one of them. You'd probably choose that one. But with this particular example, they chose the valuer, and she thought, oh, it's game over. Apparently, there must have been some sort of
Shake up?
Well, within that valuation firm, I'm sure they record valuations and addresses, but there must have been a bit of a lag during that 3-week period whereby
Right.
the original valuation hadn't been
Processed kind of by the admin
documented,
lady.
processed,
yeah, okay.
whatever. The new valuer's gone out there and come up with a totally... And that went ahead. That finance then went ahead.
Fantastic.
So a new financier, same valuation firm, but totally different number.
I can't wait. I don't know the story, so I can't wait till you tell me who it was. Because usually you'd start talking about somebody, and I'll be like, "Oh, I know that one. That's a new one." Hey,
She wouldn't mind because I've used it many times. That story, it's Sonia.
oh, was that okay? I thought you were going to say Erica. Okay, cool. Oh gosh, she had a great experience. Not only that, she got an extra dwelling put on and made an extra how much? 500,000, 700,000?
Probably. Yeah, well, back in the day, I mean, her profit out of that was 605,000 from memory. If you did that same project today, price has gone up with that, it'd be well over $1 million.
Wow. Hey,
First project.
You brought up something else there, Bob, which is something I've never thought of. Often I ask questions that I think the listener might want to hear. But you said the timeline of the valuer, between the first person valuing it from the same firm and the second person, and then perhaps that admin lapse or that paperwork lapse. But what is the general timeline of a valuer?
Oh, look, it depends how busy they are. A retail valuation could be, and that's if a valuer actually goes and inspects the property. 4 days, you should be
How
able to
often do
push
they
them through.
inspect?
Well, they don't always do it because some of them do what they call a desktop valuation.
Oh, I'm going to unpack that one. I know another one on that one.
Yeah, well, that can be like an hour or two.
What about we had a valuation within the last year or so? We would have talked about it, but you may not have listened to the episode. It was so frustrating. He did a desktop. He wasn't even in the area, and the valuation came in low.
He wasn't. Yeah, so that's when
He wasn't that intelligent, we could say.
That was a finance. So what we did there, we did no doc finance on the acquisition. Got an approval through in 2 days because it doesn't need any documentation, doesn't need any serviceability documentation or nothing. It was a bit of a complex structure, so it needed something different, and that was fine. When we moved through, we got our approvals at moving through the construction finance now. So we need a construction financier who would pay out the first financier and take over the loan, and then come up with the rest of the money to build. That's how it works. Yeah, right. And so that was a non-bank financier. They chose a valuer, and we gave the valuer all the information, almost a full valuation report. You know what we're like. We virtually do their job for them. Anyway, he wasn't from the area.
He didn't have too many brains. We didn't know that at the time. I'm only joking.
I didn't. Look,
Hopefully he doesn't listen to podcasts.
I told him to his face, so it doesn't matter. He came out with a dud valuation.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
So he chose some sales that were 2 years old. And what I mean by that is, if you're selling property off the plan when you get a DA, and somebody signs a contract and they eventually settle, that settlement is easily 12 months later. So if the market's gone up in that 12 months, that's not reflected in the sale price of that contract. The contract is 12, 14, 15 months old. So he chose one or two of those, and the market had moved up. So in one part of his report, he said the market in this area has moved up 15% in the last 12 months, yet he's using figures that were more than 12 months old, but not making any adjustment. He chose another, these are comparable sales he's chosen, right? He chose another one 9 suburbs away.
Nice and comparable.
It was like he'd made up his mind what it was worth, and then he had to justify it by picking all the wrong comparables.
Searching things that made it work.
There were so many mistakes. We went back to the financier, we went back to the valuer. We knew at this time it was game over for that valuer, but we couldn't let him get away with it. So he basically showed him all the real comparables, why his valuation was a whole heap of crap, that you don't take 12, 15, 18 months old comparables. You don't work outside of that area anyway. But we immediately moved on. But this time we had to move to another financier and therefore another valuer. This time we had a little bit more choice in who we chose. And we did choose, and I went and met him on site. I made sure he was knowledgeable of the area, and we gave him our full report. That one came in fine.
Yeah.
Came in spot on the money. And normally they do. We very rarely have a problem with a commercial valuer. I've probably had 2 in the last 10 years that were absolute idiots. And so we'll be...
what you really think, Bob?
Oh, yeah, well, no. More than that. But when we've sold this project and it's getting close to completion, I'll be getting back to that valuer and proving what an idiot he was. I mean, it's one thing saying...
You're an idiot.
You got it all wrong, and we've done that.
Because it impacts people's lives.
We'll prove it. Well, yeah.
It's not just because you have an ego that needs to be satisfied.
Imagine if that was the only value you could get.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Then or the only financier. But anyway, there's always financiers out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, that's all good fun. But in the commercial world, normally it's pretty good. They're a higher level of valuer than the retail valuers, higher level of education. They've been around longer, they're more commercially astute. And
right.
I don't normally have a problem with them.
And Bob, I remember you telling me a story about somebody who kept applying for different finance. And can you just unpack that one? Because this is quite useful, I think, for people listening to understand the impact that will have.
Yeah, it was a couple of guys who were trying to do it was a relatively large project. They did have a bit of money, but they didn't have much experience. They went out there and got a valuation, first of all, and then went looking for some finance, which is sort of doing it the wrong way
backwards,
around.
Yep.
They found somebody who appeared to be interested, but the problem is the value they chose wasn't on the panel. These were like $8,000 valuations, right? Mm-hmm. Back in the day, you'd probably pay $12,000 for the same valuation now. So now they went and got another valuation from somebody on the panel. So now they've got 2 valuations. That financier actually knocked them back. I can't remember the exact reason. So now they paid for 2 vals. They got no financier.
Oh my gosh!
They went to another financier that I had a little bit to do with them. I recommended somebody. They went there. Now they had to get another valuation because neither of the other 2 were on the panel. Now they got 3 valuations. Anyway, that finance finally happened. So they just did it all wrong.
So what is the big takeaway there?
Well, the takeaway really is you have to choose a valuer who's on the panel, ideally.
So you need to know your financier first.
Yeah. I did have a favourite financier once who wasn't on the panel of a non-bank, but I did get the non-bank to approve them onto their panel and then use them. That's pretty rare. And I was able to convince them that was a good move.
Okay, Bob, I think we've unpacked that enough for people to understand what's going on. We haven't given away the book. Book, Property Millionaires Exposed, this week going to Luke Godfrey. Luke,
Luke.
We'll be in touch for your address, and it shall be in the post probably this afternoon. And also just a little bit of something I would love from you. Mm-hmm. If you're enjoying this podcast and you get some benefit out of it, we would really appreciate if you share this with somebody you think might be interested. Just hit the share button and you can send it via text and say, hey, check these guys out. They kind of know what they're talking about. They're pretty legit.
And we've got some good stories.
We do got a lot of
Hundreds
stories.
of others about financiers and valuers.
So, yeah, we would really appreciate that. On the rest of our front, I did say I was going to talk to you about our membership. So we've just launched that, the Property Accelerator. It comes with getting started in property development. That's a full course. It comes with introduction to small subdivisions. It comes with renovations 101, and it comes with performance and mindset to make sure they actually get the stuff done. It comes with a live Q&A every 2 weeks. So we are offering the first month for $1. If you're keen on that, jump on over to our website, propertymastermind.com, and we would love for you to jump in and check us out and see what you think. We know you'll love it, but we have to say, hey, at least you've had a look. And we really do appreciate the positive comments. And for the odd keyboard warrior that's out there, go away. We always get the odd one.
Find something better to do.
Yeah, exactly. Go get you. You've got to understand how marketing works and how business works. Yeah. And I think if you're uneducated in that way, maybe read a book and you'll work it out. Someone commented something the other day. I'm like, oh, God, please go away. They said this is a promoism. One of our podcasts was a promoism.
Promoism.
I'm like, well, it's business. We have to tell people. Well, we have to tell people what we do.
Well, they must have watched it to even comment.
Yeah, they're blessed. Yeah,
maybe they learned something. Hopefully,
yeah, I'm pretty sure she did. I put underneath. Thank you. We appreciate your comments. But anyway, we hope that you have found something useful in this and taken something away. Please share if you have enjoyed it. If you'd like a copy of the book, just comment below and share. Send me a screenshot that you did. That would be definitely worth a book over. And we will see you next week in episode 111, Bob. Next week.
Wow, charging through there.
Charging through. Anyway, bye for now.
See you later.